Ms. Caroline Van Damm here. She's an adult psychiatrist and a family and systematic psychotherapist. In 1995, she started to study neurosciences at Brandeis University. She has been working at the Brussels Night Hospital, specialized in the psychosocial rehabilitation of patients suffering from chronic psychotic disorder. She shares the vision and the human being should be regarded in all their dimensions: biological, psychological, spiritual, and ecological. She has been studying and practicing Buddhist meditation.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. I must admit, I'm going to be honest, I didn't know I had to give a whole speech, so I'm going to improvise a little bit. So sorry if my words are not always very fluent. I first wanted to say that, as you hear from the introduction, I'm a doctor, I'm a medical doctor, I'm a psychiatrist. And I work in Brussels in a hospital where I treat people who suffer from severe mental illness, mostly people suffering from psychotic disorders, what we also sometimes call schizophrenia. Those people get sick when they are young adults for the first time, and usually their problems last for lifelong. Well, those are actually the ones that arrive in our consultation, in our clinic, our hospital. And so I consider myself as being, as a doctor, on the front line of human mental suffering. We actually hear a lot of theories on how society is working. We hear it in the news, we hear it from our friends, we hear about people in our community. But we as doctors, we really hear how things really are. People tell us things that they won't tell to anyone else, not even their partners or their families, because there is still a lot of shame, a lot of misunderstandings, and so they will only tell certain things to us. So we feel kind of privileged to be on the front line and really hear what goes on in people's lives. I hear a lot of secrets of people, and I can sometimes it has a bad effect on me too, because it's so depressing sometimes what I hear that I get depressed myself. There is a huge amount of human suffering, and so I'm very grateful for my job to be able to be witnessing that and to help or try to help those people. In fact, no later than yesterday, I read an article written by a historian of medicine who described psychiatrists since the 19th century as being the managers of despair. And I can really relate to this definition. I sometimes really feel I'm a manager, although I don't like that word, but a manager of despair. I hear a lot of despair. Yes, so people who suffer from schizophrenia, they are usually young adults, as I said before. They have usually started, nothing's wrong. They leave high school, they start going to college, or they start training for a certain job, or they start working. And then suddenly life changes dramatically for them. They start hearing voices, hallucinating, having paranoid delusions. They end up not being able to finish their studies. They lose their job. They lose their friends. They sometimes, very often lose their houses too. Some end up in the streets, end up very lonely. Their ancient life, which was promising, is not going to happen anymore. Families get desperate. They get desperate. So even if I'm specialized in people who suffer from psychosis, there is a lot of despair also, and 1 out of 10 of my patients will end up committing suicide. This is something we know. Of course, it's not only psychotic patients who get depressed and desperate and commit suicide. We know in our human society that mental illness is increasing. According to the World Health Organization, in our Western societies, 1 out of 4 people will have mental health issues during their lifetime, which is an enormous amount of people. But psychiatry is still underfunded in most of the countries of the world, even here in Belgium. We don't have enough psychiatrists and psychologists to help cope with all this human suffering that is actually exploding. We know, for example, for the United States, for a long time, the first cause of death of young people under the age of 35 was car accidents, because of course they don't have cancers yet and all other chronic health, physical health issues. So the number one cause of death was car accidents. But the last years, I think the last decade, suicide has actually surpassed car accidents. And these numbers are also true here in Europe. So young people are committing more and more suicide every year. Those numbers are increasing all around the Western world, or I would say the industrialized world. So how does this happen? How is this possible? My idea to that is that we live in a society which loses connections to each other. Loneliness is exploding. Loneliness is increasing. Family ties are disappearing. People don't live in small communities anymore. They go to more and more. They get more and more dispersed. And also in our society, the concepts of solidarity, of taking care of each other, are actually diminishing, and we focus much more on the individual. If someone is suffering, mental suffering, we will not put the system into question. We will blaming the individual, say, you should get yourself back together, you should try harder, you should do this, you should do that. So we blame individuals for the problems that are happening, and we don't want, or we don't dare to look at the bigger picture of trying to see what's going wrong in our society. And because there is this more and more individualized approach of life, of everything, there is also this loss of spiritual connections. I can see that here in Europe. I witnessed this very much. Since Second World War, churches are emptying. People don't find connection to the Christian religion, which is our historical religion. Here, they don't feel understood anymore by the church. We can say many things about the church, criticize them, but it has this effect that there is no common religion that connects us all anymore, and people either find a way into not believing in anything anymore and feeling extremely lonely. Once they die, they just disappear, or they will turn to new religions, new spiritualities, and there is also this risk of falling for certain cults. Thank God, not all of our cults. But there are still people who are very religious, and I can also see from my practice that people who are very religious will commit less suicide than the other ones, because, well, what they tell me is that it's because the religion prohibits it for them. They will feel as suicidal as someone else, but they will just not do it because they are afraid to go to hell, because their religion prohibits them from doing so. So it doesn't mean that it's not because they commit less suicide that they are feeling better and that they are protected by their religion. It just means that they will not commit suicide, but their mental suffering is still as big as for someone who doesn't believe in anything. So purely religion will not protect people from mental suffering. what I believe is that, and it's because I see it in my practice, before we can help people connect to more spiritual practices to feel better, the first step is to find human connection again, to help people feeling included, understood, and trusted, because that is what the main problems are, what people tell me. Their main suffering is feeling lonely, feeling misunderstood, having a loss of connection. And it can take any form. It can take the form of depression. It can take the form of paranoia, of psychosis, of personality problems. People are trying to find all kinds of ways to feel connection again. And when I talk to depressed people, when I talk to people who are desperate, they tell me that their greatest suffering are not as symptoms of mental health. That's not the main issue. The main issue is that they feel misunderstood. And if they talk about it to other people around them, they will feel people are not listening and people are judging them. So what I do when I see someone who is depressed, I will ask him about how depressed he is. And if he has thoughts about committing suicide, I will first ask, do you think that dying is a solution for your problem? And usually when I ask this question, people are surprised that I ask this question, because it's the first time someone dares to ask them that question. Of course, they have been playing with the idea of suicide for a long time, but they didn't talk about it to anyone. They didn't dare to talk about it to anyone. So they are very surprised that the doctor is asking them. Instead of telling them immediately, you shouldn't commit suicide, or you should do this, or you should do that, I just ask them, how do you think of the idea of dying? And then they will tell me, oh yes, I think of that very regularly. Then there could be two ways of thinking of that. There is the way of thinking of passive dying, that they just hope they would die in their sleep. They don't think about committing suicide, but they wish they would disappear because their suffering is too great. That's already a huge suffering. At least for those people, I don't need to worry that they will really commit suicide, but I worry about their mental health. They feel so disconnected, they feel so bad that they prefer to be dead than alive. So, of course, afterwards I will ask about how suicidal they are, and in the end I ask what their concrete plans are. And some of them really tell me, I have a rope in my garage and I have a date and I will hang myself on that date. But the fact that I ask those questions, this actually before the people who want to die, they first want to have connection before they want to die. Their first idea. And so the fact that I'm asking all those questions, they realize, well, actually I need help to find connection again. Because as long as I don't feel this connection, I will still want to disappear and to die. And so to me, I'm very attached to what we call the attachment theory. The attachment theory is a theory which states that human beings not only need food and sexual reproduction to live, we also need attachment. There have been experiments done in the 60s, which are quite horrible, with monkeys, where we separated monkeys from their mothers and we let them all alone. Well, in the end, the monkeys, we did that with dogs, we did that. We even have the experience of orphanages in Romania, where kids have received food and where they have received security, but they didn't receive affection at all. They were never touched. And those kids really turned into, they had some autistic behavior, we would say, autistic-like behavior. The suffering was just huge and amazing. So we first need to reconnect as human beings. And so if you have people around you who you think are quite lonely, don't have many friends, please go to those people, talk to them, listen to them, don't judge them. If you hear people talking about wanting to commit suicide, thinking about that, you can always, if you don't know how to handle this, you can always be there for them, but also forward them to professional help, to psychologists or psychiatrists. So as long as we don't have this human connection, to me personally, spirituality will have not great effect. Because in the second step is only when we have connection among each other, then we can find meaning in life, and then our life is not going to be something utilitarian in an economic model. I'm useful because I have a job and I give money to society, and if I lose my job and I cannot work, which many of my patients do, they cannot work. They feel that they are not useful in society and they feel rejected. We shouldn't reject people who cannot work and bring money into the society. So when we have this human connection, sometimes it takes time. It usually takes time. It doesn't work from one day to another. We need time and we need patience, and we need to accept everyone's differences and diversity of people. And then in a second step, can we connect to more something higher meaning, like a spiritual or religious practice. So what I do is I also once a month, I don't have time to do it more often, I wish I could, but I meditate with my patients, the ones who want that. We will do very short, simple meditations, mindful breathing. That's it. And we do that together once a month with the same group, and people can join if they want, if they can leave whenever they want. And the idea is that they also practice every day for 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, whatever they like, doing mindful breathing. And so in the beginning, I was like, I'm a doctor, I should keep everything about religion. It's not for me, it's for the chaplains. I'm not going to talk about this. But then I realized people in the group started to connect to each other. We created a small community of meditators, and questions about religion and spirituality came very quickly. My patients are from very diverse backgrounds. Certain of are Christians, others are Muslims, others are atheists. But by talking about all those things, about life after death, about is there a God, is there no God, after we meditate, in exchanging ideas and just accepting everyone's views and ideas, this really gives my patients a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy to continue to practice. And I can also see that they actually tell me that their symptoms are diminishing, they are feeling better with time. And so they think it's one of the best ways to cope with their mental health issues. Of course, they will still continue to hear voices, but they become less stressful, less annoying, because they know there is a community behind them who supports them, who listens to them, who understands them. And they also feel there is this higher connection with something greater. And so it's this whole package, this whole picture that helps them. So to conclude, I can only say that spirituality can be giving meaning to people, can give meaning to people. It can prevent depression, it can prevent suicide, and therefore it can prevent mental suffering. But in order to connect with something higher, we first need to reconnect with each other, to take care of each other, to talk to the neighbor we don't know, who seems like a lonely person, a weird person. We need to listen to people in our families who are difficult people we have a difficult relationship with. We need to try to solve those problems, listen without judging, and only then a relationship can start when people feel connected. And then spirituality in any form can help people and society in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline ji. It is such an in-depth, experiential analysis that you brought here. I'm sure that all the audience world over, they will listen this speech again and again, and they can connect with the people around. And what you mentioned, you are right. You are manager of despair, whether you like this term or not, but certainly you are contributing a lot. And I loved the way you mentioned that first we need to connect to human level 1, and then human we may connect to higher. But yes, you mentioned about human reconnect, family ties, not to blame anybody, in the inclusion instead of individualism, develop a social support, develop the feeling of solidarity once again. and you said that spiritual people do not commit suicide that often. Religious people do not commit suicide so often, but it does not mean they don't go through pain. So, in order to avoid that pain, we need to do all the tricks, all the methods that you said. And you mentioned that word feeling misunderstood again and again. I am sure that after listening to your speech, people would go one extra mile to understand others. They won't judge each other much because, as you mentioned, there are many people who are passively dying, not only actively. So we will create a world where we'll understand each other, human to human connect, and then human to higher connect, which you are also doing in terms of group meditations also. We are so honored, blessed with your presence, Dr. Caroline ji, and I'm sure you'll keep blessing us in future course of time also. Thank you very much for
Thank you
being
very much. Bye-bye.
On behalf of United Consciousness, I thank Ms. Caroline Windham Hugh for coming onto the platform of United Consciousness. Thank you so much.